Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm Tina Clark, your host, and I'm a shamanic Reiki Master teacher. My business is Stargazing Angel. And today I have another fellow Reiki Master as a guest today. His name is Orion Mott, and he specializes in concussion therapy. And he's going to share his story of how he was able to overcome and heal from a concussion. So welcome to the show, Orion.
Nice to meet you.
So tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and your background.
What would you like to know? There's a lot of stories out there. So
Yeah,
you lead me where you want to go.
Summary.
Okay, I'll give you the short form. At 18 months old, I had spinal meningitis, and I basically died and was brought back. Yeah, I believe either it was a near-death experience or it was a death. They did bring me back with the paddles after grand mal seizures. You know, it was a very traumatic early childhood. I don't remember any of that, of course, because I was too young. But I grew up with my brain not working properly. It just didn't function, almost like a concussion. But my comprehension wasn't as good. I could read a passage and not get the inferences from the passage. And because I couldn't use my brain as fast and I couldn't read and write like all the other kids in, I think it was grade 3 or grade 4, I started developing my spiritual abilities, my intuitive abilities to make up for what I lacked. And in 2003, 2004, I was doing body talk and became a body talk practitioner. And one of the things they all have to do with the practitioners is they have to put you on the table and they have to show you things by physically doing it to your body. And the head of the group said, "Oh, you have like a brain disorder. You've got some learning disabilities. Let's fix that. Tap, 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 breathe, 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 tap, tap, tap." And I felt my brain pop together. And from then my brain was fine. I literally drove out of there and I felt this sense of interconnectivity between the brain parts. They're all speaking to each other. So what do you do with all of this intuitive and talking to your brain for your entire life? Well, I became a bit of a brain specialist, and I didn't know at the time, but a few years later, I realized that I could feel other people's brains because of mine having been in disorder. I just became very acutely aware of other people's disorder. It's sort of like someone who has a bad dog learns how to work with their dog, and now they work with other people's bad dogs. The same kind of thing with the brain for me. So I learned how to feel people's brains, intuitively look inside their brains and see what's going on. And with some of the techniques that I've created, the neuroplasticity, I get people to use their pineal gland and stretch their awareness through their damaged tissue to fix their brain. It's the opposite of Reiki, which is Reiki is bringing the energy in through your body and translating that into somebody. I create a null, a void. And that void is actually what I need for them to shift their awareness into that void. And that's when their brain starts to heal. So that's the long and the short of it. But that's the energy neuroplasticity that I work with.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Can you talk a little bit more about what body talk therapy is? Because I'm not too familiar with it.
Well, it's very big in fact, the head of the school right now is just south of there in Florida. John Valtime was the creator. I believe it was in the late 80s, early 90s that he started this thing from Australia. He was an interesting philosophical man. He was all basically using this deep breathing technique combined with tapping and focus and intent, and created this therapy using applied kinesiology, which is muscle testing. For your audience, you ask a yes or a no, and you pull the arm, and it does yes or it says no. It was the technology at the time spiritually that was available in the 90s and the early 2000s. It kind of fell out of favor here in Canada. It was really big for a while, and then sort of disappeared because most of us became medical intuitives. A lot of us, from asking the body and trying to read the body and pulling the arm, it's just easier to sit here and just read their body. It's a lot faster. So a lot of us became medical intuitives. So in fact, there's very few body talk practitioners left that I know. They've all switched over to just reading people directly.
Wow. Well, that's probably why I don't know anybody who practices it.
It was very big for a time, early 2000s, and it just fell off the wagon towards other things. Reiki is really huge. Where I am, even the last 5 years, we went from 5 people on Google for Reiki to about 50. During COVID, a lot of people studied Reiki around here. So this is the kind of Toronto is the spiritual mecca for spirituality in Canada, as far as I've seen, in terms of what I can see. And I'm very friendly with all the other practitioners. So it's become a huge resource for anyone looking for spirituality, looking for healers and body workers and therapists and therapeutic touch and cranial sacral therapists. This is and massage. This is the headquarters for that. So if anyone travels to Toronto, you're going to find a lot of that here.
Well, there's not a lot of that here in
Mm.
the Charleston area. And fun fact, I've taught over 80 students in this area, and I taught my 13th Reiki Master teacher on Sunday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. So maybe I'll go to 22 like Hawaii Takata. And then I'll be like, I'm done. At least with the Reiki teachers.
It's a passion. It's a passion for flow, teaching people flow state and showing the value of flow state. I really think Reiki is something that should be internationally known. It should be something that everyone should do. I know in the people that I've taught are massage therapists, and what they do, and I recommend this to anyone to take Reiki if they're a massage therapist or do any kind of touch on the body, because you charge a little bit more and you add a little bit more. You add flair to your massage. You're like, I'll do some massage and then I'll do some energy work to balance you out. And it's just something you can add on to your other practice. And so I see a lot of that. So, well, you can do a massage or you can do a Reiki massage. We'll tack on another hour on for the Reiki massage. And people say, yeah, absolutely. I'm stressed out. Get me down. So it's something extra on top of just something else as well. So I see that a lot. It's called Reiki massage, and it's both. It's a 2 hour or hour and a half session. But it's something that people can, again, add on to their practice. You don't have to just do Reiki. It's something you can put in with a bunch of things. I call them integrated because I don't even want to define what it is. Let's go, let's talk, and let's heal. And Reiki's one thing. But if they need to, if they have a lot of trauma, heart clearing is just going in and ripping the pain out of their heart and putting it on the ground and putting love in its place and compassion for the self in its place. And that changes how the heart feels, right?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like around here, I'll just speak locally, that Reiki is really undervalued and not understood very well. And well, I live in the Bible Belt too, and they like to call all this stuff like witchcraft and blah blah. It's not allowed, and so there's that big obstacle to overcome.
The easiest way to teaching people, when people ask what Reiki is, it's like, when you had your child and you held them in your arms, you unconditional love shined into their body. It's like that with your hands. And people are like, oh, that's what it is. Like, it's a really easy, when you put it context that people will understand and use words. And even I get some very Christian fundamentalists coming into my office, and I use the terms that they will understand in the terminology. But it's mana energy. It's in the Bible. If you look for it, you will find it. And what is the idea of holding love and compassion from their Lord and Savior is the same thing of holding light and love in a Reiki or shamanic way. They're not dissimilar. It's just these words get in the way of it.
And I always say, when Jesus laid his hands on people and healed them, what do you think he was doing?
What was he doing?
They weren't talking. They probably didn't call it Reiki. They probably called it something else. But we know that he got trained in Eastern traditions and spent a lot of time in India with the Druids and all over the place.
The whole that whole area of Israel was part of the Silk Road, so there was a lot of knowledge traveling back and forth between the East and West, and I'm sure a lot of stories, a lot of religions, a lot of things we don't even know about, knowledge that was available, because that trade also meant there was a lot of knowledge that was transferred over, and I'm sure that was helpful in that development.
That's a good point too. So let's get into your story and what happened to you and what you experienced a concussion. So tell us what happened.
Well, I didn't experience a concussion. I had the brain injury from the spinal meningitis, but it caused my brain to be very concussion-like, where my brain parts weren't talking to each other. So I understand what a brain feels like. The best way I can describe a concussion for the people who've never had one, it's like being under the water, where you can hear sound, but it's kind of muffled. You can do things, but it's very slow. And you have to do things, but it's very methodical, and you really got to pay attention, and it's exhausting. It's like you're holding your breath all the time. That's what it feels like for someone with a concussion. So when my brain healed, I I had all this sensory perception of my brain. And it was not hard for me, especially with the medical intuitive stuff that I was doing, to feel what was going on in other people's brains. So I would put my hand over, this one kid came in, I was his personal trainer, and I put my hand over his head. And I said, "Hey, do you feel the heat of my hand?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, I feel a lot of coldness above my head." I said, "Yeah, I feel a lot of coldness too." It was like the opposite of Reiki. I felt there's a blockage. And I said, "I just want you to reach up and feel the heat of my hand, expand your awareness." And by the way, he was Orthodox Jewish. Expand your awareness into my hand. And he did. And there was a discerned popping sound in his head. And there's a popping, clicking sound in my head. And we both said, "Well, that was really strange." It wasn't strange for me. I've been doing weird things all my life. I'll always try something out. But he went to home, he went to sleep, he slept a whole day, came back, said, "My concussion's gone. Like, there's no symptoms of my concussion." So that was the first one. And that was 2005 or 6. And then a few years later, another one came to me with a concussion. I did the same thing. "Well, let me put my hand over your head. Let's see if we can." And before I knew it, I created an entire protocol for systematically taking my hand and then moving it around and having people expand their awareness. And as they do, they heal themselves with that perception from the outside. You can't heal yourself from the inside. You do need someone. It's like tickling. You need someone from the outside to do it for you to actually have that experience. I've tried this long distance. They actually have to be in my office, or have to be with the athlete on the table in their presence to do this, because I have to physically feel out the cold and hot spots of their brain, and which is energy versus, blockages or inflammation.
That's interesting, because I know that there are people who have received Reiki, very few though, that feel cold. And I always thought it's because that's how they translate energy to themselves. But do you think that they were blocked?
Sometimes, I mean, it's a case by case basis. Some people hold their energy. I know in Canada here, especially Toronto, they hold their energy very tight. Their soul and their body are really tight into their body, and they don't have that natural childlike sense of flow about themselves. They have armor, and those people, when they reach out beyond themselves, feel cold because everything's held in tight. So sometimes that's a perception. When the work I do with concussions, and we release something in the brain, they get shivers down their body and they feel like they're cold. They're not. They've got lots of blankets on them, but for a few seconds, their toes go numb and their fingers go numb. And I don't quite know how that works, but I think it's just whatever's going on in the blood-wise in the brain is affecting the physiology for a few minutes. So
Wow.
that does happen.
I know when I do Reiki, or when the Reiki is running, I get really warm.
Yeah.
And then as I'm working on someone and moving around the body, I'll get warm. I'll feel that warmth really kick in certain places. And then I'll know, oh, this spot really needs, focus.
You know what's a lot of fun? I have a big native drum. I work with the native community in Toronto, and I blur the lines between energy healing and shamanic work. I did study with a shaman. I have a big drum, a big native drum, a 12-inch drum, and I drum over their body. And the neat thing is, I do this in my workshops. When you drum over somebody's body, you actually will hear a pitch change of the drum when you're over the damaged or wounded areas, or a liver that's damaged, or a kneecap that's got some problems or pain, inflammation. There's electromagnetic field around the body, and when you use the drum, it taps into that. And when the electromagnetics change over a wounded site, it deadens the drum sound. So you go boom, 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 tick, 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 boom, boom. And I'm like, oh, you got a liver problem. Boom, 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 tick, tick. You got a knee problem. And it's a lot of fun to do. You have to shift yourself. Like dowsing, you got to be in that relaxed Reiki kind of state where you ask the drum to show you where the wounds or the weaknesses are. And if you just drum over someone just with very methodical tapping over the drum, you'll actually hear the pitch changes. And they'll hear the pitch changes. And they'll say, "What was that?" It's that much audible too, because if you think of the magnetics of the body, whenever there's a wound, the magnetics get all squished up, get all triggered up. And that's where the pain is, or that's where the inflammation is, or whatever's going on. And the sound, the electromagnetics are different, and the drum sound will actually change pitch to show that. So it's kind of a neat little way of diagnosing people. I don't know if they did that in ancient times. It's something I just intuitively did once. I was like, well, that was interesting. Let's try that again. And so when I have a big group of people, a big auditorium, I'll grab people's names from a hat and lay on the table, people I've never worked on before, and we'll just do the drum over them. And you're like, oh, you got some this, oh, you got that. And it's just it's a tangible way where they can see that, oh, there is perceptions and availability of something physical out there showing me I've got problems inside. So for them, it's kind of like, it's kind of like an MRI to some extent, ancient MRI, if you will, of finding dysfunction. They know there's a problem, but when they don't tell you, and you're not psychically reading, you're just using just a drum. There is no denial of the fact that there are things out there that can show inner problems. There are devices out there that you can do. You can do dowsing. You can do, they have these things, these rods. You can use the rods. There's lots of different ways. But the drum is really interesting because it's really different and really unexpected.
Well, I have a drum too because I practice shamanic healing, and I've used it in sound healing. Usually sound healing, people are using bowls or gongs, but I got drums. I'm going to pull my drums in, but I'm going to try that. I'm curious now.
Do it with someone you've never worked with, put them on the table and drum over them and just see. And just be really, the same. Don't drum different or different pace. Just drum over them. And you will see how the pitch will just ever so little just change. And the resonance soft, like it feels muffled, the resonance. And that's really, it's discernible. If you've got good hearing, you'll discern the difference on there. It's a really great tool. And I'm sure this is something that instead of smudging someone, you can drum over them. You can drum away.
Because sound is clearing. So, I always teach in Reiki level 1 how to clear your space and create a sacred space. So sometimes you're traveling, it's just useful for traveling. You can't burn incense in a hotel room.
Right.
So I say, if you've got nothing, clap your hands around the room with the intention of clearing it. Or you can use a bell, you could use a drum, you could use high vibrational music or frequencies. So
that's interesting. You just taught me something. In martial arts, when my parents had a martial arts school, I grew up doing that kind of thing. And we always did a bow and we did a clap. And I'd never thought about clearing the air, clearing the energy, but that makes complete sense to me now. I never quite understood what the clapping was about because we'd always do a bow and then we'd do a clap and then we'd turn to the teacher or the sensei, we'd bow and we'd do a clap. And that is probably clearing the air energy of the room. I never put that into a context. Thank you.
Really appreciate that. Well, one of my Reiki students, when I told her that about the clapping, she said, well, my grandmother used to do that. She would walk into the room and start clapping her hands. And I said, that's probably what your grandmother was doing.
It's also good to note that the energy's changed. They say if we showed up 100 years ago to the people, we'd glow a little bit, that we would have an aura that they don't have.
Yes.
The energy's changed. What I had to do in the old days, and this is going way back in my career into the early 2000s here, I used to go onto estates and clear the energies of where people died or there were ghost hauntings and I'd work in a state and I had to do my shamanic drum and I'd do my singing and drumming and I'd do my crystals and I'd do all of the things that I was taught. And that's how I would clear out a space. It got to a point where I'd just sit there and I would use my heart and I would just take my heart and shine my heart and feel the room and feel like my heart is pushing everything out of the room. And it only took a few seconds. Just sit there and just shine that heart and push everything out of the room. Well, that was a lot faster. It was a lot quicker. And it's something that I do consciously when I go into someone's home, especially if there's a thickness in the air or a heaviness in the air. I will shine my heart and just push and create my own resonance of my immediate surroundings. I will change the area to my preference by shifting my heart and literally with my heart pushing everything else out. But we are changing and evolving in terms of our spiritual abilities too. And so I just want to say that for all the people who are doing the traditional things the traditional ways, give yourself the credit that you could find a little more efficient way of doing those things if you just have a little imagination and a little intuition on those things. But it's a lot faster now. I don't need to drum. I don't need to sing. I don't need to, do the crystals. I just sit in the room, I meditate, and I just push. And I go into the next room and I push. And I get to the point where there's an entity or something I've got to do some healing work. And instead of sending it away, I'll sit down, we'll do some work together. I'll do some healing work intuitively, and then look out the window and say, okay, it's time to go, and just create a light and shine them out, and then they're gone. But using your heart is actually so powerful if you use it like a tool, not just to have feelings.
Yeah, I've evolved that way too, because I used to do a lot of shielding And then I had a teacher that said, you don't need to shield. You just need to go into your heart energy
Yeah,
and push that heart energy out.
absolutely.
And
That's
then
that's
it'll
exactly right.
clear anything that's not of a
Right.
high vibration or love.
And
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 then with
yeah,
with the beings, I do the same thing, because we're both practicing shamanism.
right.
I find out what's wrong, figure out what's going on with them, and then show them the light source. That's all you
Yeah.
need to do.
That's it. Just intuitively came to me that the traditional way is changing as we're evolving and our consciousness is evolving. The other thing that I work with, and which is very anti New Age, and I hope I don't offend anybody, is the idea that people carry shielding and armor. What happens when someone who's very energetic and they lay on my table and they've got a disease, there's always armor over top of that disease. And the
Mm.
very first thing I get them to do is release all their armor. They find it, we do a permission slip where they release all their armor. Instead of having armor, I get them to shine their light, their energy, their chakra energy, if you will, into the space around them, into their soul that sits around them. And if the body and the soul are in flow, you don't have to worry about armor. You don't have to worry about other people's intentions because you're balanced within yourself energetically. And what happens is that those diseases have no reason to be there because the soul can now enter the body, because it will not enter your body if you have armor or if you have protection. You
Mm.
also keep out all the good stuff. So it's just a
Yeah.
permission, but having no armor and just focusing on being fully yourself, like a kid, be fully yourself. That's enough for a big energetic shift where you don't have to worry about other people's intentions. And yes, I'm doing a session. I'm sure it happens to you. People are thinking about me. They show up in my face. I'm like, oh, okay. Hello, John. And I push John away. And hello, Gertrude. And I push Gertrude away. People thinking about me will show up. And with love, I just then send them away. And then
Hmm.
they don't come back for a while. So that's how I deal with because you have no armor. Everyone's perceiving you. Everyone's, connecting with you. And it can be a little overwhelming for a practitioner to be feeling 10 people at the same time, but you can do that as long as you hold your own space.
Oh, yeah. That when I first started doing Reiki, I would just send out this message. If there's anybody that's curious about this Reiki session, I said, you can be here, but please watch from a distance.
Right. Right. Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So you're aware of that too.
Yeah,
I'll tell
for
you a funny
sure.
story. Every time I go for a Reiki session, because I have a practitioner, and we work with each other. This is how we keep ourselves in balance. There's a lot of Reiki shares here. A lot of people do Reiki for each other, and we do a lot of exchanges. And the neat thing about that is when someone's doing a Reiki session with me, there's an old woman knitting in the corner. And I'm like, yeah, that's my grandmother. Every session I've ever done, every session I've ever been with, my grandmother shows up in the corner and she just sits there and holds space and knits. My Oma, my grandmother. And every time someone says like, oh, there's an old lady in the corner, I'm like, yeah, it's my grandmother. She's here every time. And every session I do, she's there. She holds space for me. And I don't quite know what that is, but I know that a lot of people perceive her there. And she just holds this wonderful, loving energy and just holds this vibration for me for the work I do. So,
I think our ancestors are, of
yeah,
course, interested in what we're doing.
I think
And
so.
if they had any abilities, they probably didn't have a lot of freedom to practice. And so, it here's like Orion, hey, he's doing Reiki now, and
Right.
I'm going to be with him every time he's doing it.
Yeah. People ask me that one of the questions I get a lot is how big is my soul? I get that one a lot because I'll answer anything people want to ask in my session. I do these integrated session, and we'll do some heart clearing, or we'll do some removal of armor. That's a big one. Especially if people have gone through trauma, they hold a lot of armor, a lot of fear, and I get them, or people have been beat up a lot and bullied. I get them to expand them sense of self, so they don't have to go through that. What they ask is how large is the soul, and I'm always, when I've gone to a funeral of someone who is a good person, a big personality person, whether it's a church or a synagogue or a temple, I'm walking in somewhere between the front door and the parking lot where I park my car. I feel the line where I'm like, oh, I'm in their soul now. And I walk into the place and I feel like I'm in the soup of that person. They are so apparent. It's like they're shining so bright and filling that room. And it's the size of a soul is over 100 feet across. If you were to give it a physical size, it's a large. If you're in a big church, it's going to fill up the church. If you're in a synagogue, it's going to fill up your synagogue. That space, that expansiveness is what we really are when we're not in body. And it's really interesting. People that are kind of negative people, or people that are fairly unliked, they usually don't show up at their funeral. They're not there. I'm very aware of when people show up, and I'm very aware when people don't show up, or it's like an empty room and we're speaking to nobody because they're not even consciously aware of things, or they hold themselves so small they're undetectable. But I'm very aware in funerals this. But the understanding is that when you connect to that big field that's around you, you honor that field. You're really honoring your full self, not just your physical body and your physical existence, but your eternal self. And that sense of you and the other thing, your visible self and your invisible self being part of a continuum of beingness, that's really powerful. And in the martial art world, we call that, chi energy, or having, the warrior spirit, if you will. And all that is that sense of expansiveness, and using that as a feeling tool, using it as an intuitive tool for the work we did.
Oh, yeah. If I were to explain how I get information, psychic information in the field, it would be an intentional expansion of my aura.
Yes.
So, and I could expand it to the room, to down the street,
Right. No, exactly.
and I will pick up on feelings, emotions, energies, thoughts. That's a lot to pick up on, even in just a neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and
you said 100, everybody's soul's 100 feet big,
over,
but not
over,
everybody's
over.
walking around with their field 100 feet wide.
There's value into coming from the spiritual plane of this omnipotent, kumbaya, wonderful, if you're the Christian belt, the kingdom of heaven, there's value to that, coming to this planet, forgetting everything, and then finding that again within your own consciousness. There's value in the forgetting and then the relearning. If we were all in this high frequency reality, we were all connected to our divinity and connected to each other, it would be kind of a boring place because we wouldn't get as much development. There is, as I understand, my mom's a past life regressionist. So you can imagine, with my dad being a martial arts instructor, my mom being a yoga teacher, and past life regression is the kind of life I had. But in looking at my past lives, one of them has been an engineer. The other one was a sick person. The other one was a healthy, athletic person. One person was sick all the time. We play out all. One was wealthy, one was poor. We play out all these different polarities and scenarios, so we get the full human existence. So when you see someone with a completely different life path, don't judge that, because they're here to be exactly that person. Because if they've been healthy for a lifetime, they might have a lifetime where they have this terrible illness, and now they have to allow themselves to be taken care of. They have to allow the humility of other people's love to be important in their life, and they also open the hearts of people around them by being taken care of. So don't judge their life path because it's different from yours. Understand that they're choosing that life path. And I'll just tell you, with the trauma work I do, I get all types of people. I had this woman come in, and she had quit being a prostitute, but that was for many years, her life path. And when we go into her past lives, and back then I was doing a lot of past life reading, she had been a monk, a priest, a monk, a priest, a monk, a priest, male all the way along. And the intuition was, let's do something different. I've been sitting and
different.
Something different than sitting by yourself, being alone in prayer state or in monk state. Go out and be touched by humanity. And so her choice, and again, I don't judge it, because her choice was to play out the other polarity of what she's experienced for what she needed to get out of that. And that's an analogy. What I'm trying to say is, we're here to play out and understand different points of view of our divinity, taking divinity and play out those scenarios. And we, just like a movie, you can walk out. If you're in a horror movie and you want a love story, you can walk out anytime once you give yourself permission to resolve that particular thing you came in to do. You don't have to stay in your horror story lifetime. You can say, you know what? Okay, I've done that. I'm going to forgive them. I'm going to release that. And I'm going to choose the love story lifetime and just make a conscious effort to love myself unconditionally. And then now I'll allow other people to love me unconditionally. And I'll be in that better sense of flow with what I prefer. And that's when you change your life path. But you have to acknowledge why you were here. You have to acknowledge all of the experiences. And you have to grow beyond those things to know that the trauma made you a deeper person. Let the trauma make you a deeper person. Let go of the trauma, stay a deeper person. And what do you want to do with that now? Right? And that's where the growth starts. But a lot of people get stuck with their trauma. I'm this way because that's happened to me. And I get it. I understand how powerful that is, but that's giving the experience over power over you instead of understanding you're someone who went through an experience, not someone who is an experience. We aren't our experiences. Experiences are experiences. Just like we don't say we are the movies we've watched.
Yeah.
Those are movies we watch, and then we'll watch a different movie. We aren't these. Who we are is something much more divine and much more interesting than just someone who went through this thing. And that over identification of trauma is the cycle of why they came here, or else they would have chosen a different family or a different scenario, right? So we have some control over these things as we get older to shift our life path if we want to, but we have to then acknowledge the full aspect of why we came here to figure out something. And once we're done with that thing, we can make that big choice of moving on from that. And you have to cut the cords with that for sure.
Don't you feel like a lot of people come here with like a long list of things that they want to heal, and that's why there's just so much of this
Give me an example.
healing going on?
Give me an example. It's by case basis. So give me an example that you can say over the air.
I'll use myself as an example. So there is mental illness in my family. There's alcoholism in my family.
Let's do that. Let's do that mental illness. That's one of my favorite subjects. So let's go there. All right. That's why I'm asking you to like ping me on a subject. Okay. So in doing the concussion work, I worked with this lovely woman, and she was 25 years old. She had bipolar schizophrenia, and she came to me to heal her concussion. I healed her concussion. In the second session of the concussion healing, I'm like, there's a second concussion here. And she said, there is? I said, yeah. I said, and I did a reading. I did a channeled state, and I did a reading on the trauma. I'm like, you're 5 years old. You're walking down the street. A kid takes a rock. Neighbor kid, he holds you down, starts beating you over the head with this rock. And then someone comes out, he gets startled and runs away. And you go back home and you fall asleep and you don't think about it. But what happened is her brain from 5 years old on was in a trauma state, fight or flight, but she didn't remember the cause. All she knew was the symptoms of her trauma. And she was traumatized every second of her life. And she's 25. So for 20 years, she's been in trauma state, in fight or flight. We did some work back then. I didn't understand the heart clearing thing that I do now. We did some Ho'oponopono, the things I understood, a little bit of Reiki. We forgave him. We released him. We let him go. She acknowledged him. She healed her heart. She consciously decided to heal her heart. We finished the rest of the concussion, and she says all the bipolar, all the schizophrenia personas are gone. All the things that step in, all the panic attacks, all the things that she knew she was broken with were gone because she chose to heal her heart. I can say that in the work that and I don't put it out there, I'm not, an expert on mental health. When people feel that they give themselves permission to look at that and heal their own hearts, because I know they're powerful enough to do so. I'm happy to work with them. And most of the time, bipolar schizophrenia and borderline personality is a person who's really super sensitive. They've gone through trauma and they're a little psychic. And with a broken heart, you walk around with that psychic power and you manifest every day trauma, or your response to trauma. And you need those combination of things. So does that apply to a family member that you're talking about?
I would say none of the ones you mentioned, but it was more like narcissism and anxiety.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just saying that's the most common reason why I see that. Narcissism, a lot of times, is people that they're choosing. It comes from a place of weakness, not from strength. A lot of people think, oh, they're narcissists because they're asses. No, a lot of times it's because they don't know power is about a gentle touch. They think power is something else, and they're wired towards power over people, to be self-important, to know that they're the most important person. That kind of narcissism is not taking into account that the other people is just as valuable, just as spiritually aligned, just as important as them. It's just not understanding that aspect, that everybody is equal. Spiritually, we're all equal. When people do a lot of heart work, they will realize that their heart is not more valuable than anyone else's hearts. And truly, to be healthy, we need to have large egos, totally large egos, but massive hearts as well, and not be out of balance with our heart and our ego. And then we can actually be useful without carrying so much pain and trauma. Mm-hmm. And so I get people to expand their ego as long as we expand the heart and their gut instinct and their intelligent mind and all the things equally, so they're all equal in size. If it's a ring, they're all in the same rung. And then you have balance between those things. But ego's not wholly bad. The people who carry a huge ego generally don't have body problems or chronic pain because they know they're divine. The heart says, but so is everybody else. And they don't have narcissism. It's just, it comes from a fear place a lot of times, or a fear that if I promote myself so much, then I won't feel so unworthy. But usually narcissism comes from a very small place. They feel tiny and they don't like feeling tiny. So they have to project this persona that's BS, and everybody knows it's BS. And that's how that works. But it comes from a feeling like a small person, that they need to be so large. Or they feel so unworthy that they have to make sure they force everyone to know that they're worthy, right? That comes from a weak place, not from a strong place. And what I mean by the gentle touch is if I give my 21-year-old daughter, who thankfully just graduated from university, I think it was today, her last exam, just give her a hug every day and give her a kiss, tell her how smart she is and how much I love her. And that's enough for her to go out and kill it in the world. That's what I mean by gentle touch. That kindness, that generosity, that sensitivity, that honoring her as a human being and as a spiritual being. That gentle touch is all we need to go out there and kill it in the world, to work really hard, to really make something of ourselves. It doesn't require huge amounts of effort, just gentle touch. And so that's what real power is: lending your love to people, filling them up with love so they take that filled love and then go do things with it. Right?
Yes. 100%.
So that's what I mean by the gentle touch. Being is so much more powerful than big ego displays or worth displays, which the question is, how weak do you have to be to need that much attention or jealousy or whatever it is that people are wired for? Why do you need that? What are you missing that you need that? And that's the question that narcissists can't answer.
What about schizophrenia? What are the voices that people are hearing?
So, and I only know this because I actually did study this in kinesiology. We did exercise and addictive behaviors, but we did a whole thing about schizophrenia. One thing and I don't know if this is the cause, but it's interesting. The pineal gland works, when you use to read people, the one I use to do my psychic work. Psychic work is all pineal gland, usually as the primary place of spirituality, where we interpret energy in our brain, if you will. When it comes to people who have that kind of thing, a lot of times their pineal gland, the pineal gland is where we see things energetically, but also it's when we dream, when we imagine, when we dream, and we close our eyes, we go into deep dream, and we have these very vivid, very emotional dreams. That's our pineal gland that's active. When people, as I understand it, that have schizophrenia, their pineal gland's turned on. So like they're looking at you, but a shark is about to bite them. Like on top of you. That reality of dream is on top of this reality. It doesn't filter out what's real and what's not real. They're seeing multiple realities. Their dream-like or their fear creates this experience, and they're reacting to that thing, not to you, but to that thing they're actually seeing, because their pineal gland is malfunctioning, force them to see things or hear things that aren't there for physically in the world, but in their dream state, it is absolutely real. So imagine if you're awake and you're having a dream at the same time, and now you understand the voices and the energies and the feelings and the chaoticness of schizophrenia.
So the voices are coming from where?
Well, the question is, when you dream, where's all that imagery come from? You'd have to answer that. You'd have to answer that first. I don't know where dreams come from. I don't know where we see all these things or have all these experiences in dreams, but it comes from some combination of things, probably something biological, something physiological, something mental, something emotional, probably a combination of all those things. I know if I have indigestion, I have different kind of dreams than if I don't have indigestion. So I think there's a biological component to it too. But I think, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I've understood is that they're seeing things and they're reacting to things that are real for them. And it's not make-believe. They're actually experiencing those things. The question is, why is the pineal gland cracked? Why is it on when it should be turned off? Why are they seeing these, having these experiences? Why is their brain different from others? Right?
Well, I think usually it begins with some kind of nervous breakdown or psychotic break or extreme stress.
And I do work with people that are neurodivergent, and people have had bouts of schizophrenia. It's a lot of it has to do, The one thing that happens with all of those people that I've worked with is they have a very strong low self-esteem, a very strong low self-esteem, because they know they're not normal. The very first thing is for them to hold themselves in a place of love, and for their family and friends to hold them in a place of love and kindness. That's the first foundation. And then with that love, they need to explore balance and focus on their dreams, and then working hard physically. It's just whatever they're going through, it's going to be 10 times harder than you and I. They have to, and they're going to go slower, but they have to understand they're valuable, and then they have to value their gifts. And if I can find a gift that they have, if I can find a thing that they're an amazing singer or amazing dancer or something that's special about them, I get them to focus on that. There's enough lawyers and dentists in the world, okay? I get them to focus on the thing that they're amazing at, and then delegate the things they can't do to somebody else. So if you could be a pro athlete and be a little on the spectrum, and what you can't do because you're ADHD or whatever, you hire somebody to do the things you don't do, the cleaning of the room and the cleaning of the table and mopping the floors. You hire someone for what you can't do and focus on that hockey, which you're really good at, right? And so I try to get them focus on their dreams and really exploring and go to their best level in something with that love and compassion. But what they can't do, they have to delegate. What they're impossible to do, they have to delegate to someone else. And that creates somewhat of a life for these people. It's not perfect, but it's something.
What are you finding right now with your clients? Like, what are the patterns or the issues that people are having right now predominantly?
Well, what I understand with the 2012 shift of energy, of consciousness, from a slightly, as Bashar said, my favorite channeler, from a slightly negative world to a slightly positive world, what's happening is that we're all in group therapy. You look at the politics, you look at, media, you look at the news, and all their stuff is coming for, all their darkness is coming to the surface. And what I understand is, as there's more light, as the sun is changing its energy, as the earth is rumbling a little bit, as there's more light on this planet, everyone's darkness that's been trapped all inside of them has to come up for them to ladle off. They have to become conscious of the darkness that they carry, or the disconnect, or their emotions that are trapped in their body parts. It comes to a head for them where they can't deny these things. And so what's happening now is that people are more in touch with all this light. It's sort of like, I'll give you an analogy. It's sort of like if you imagine a garage that's full of dust and dirt. When you turn on the lights, you suddenly see all the dirt and you have to clean it. You can't ignore it. It's fine when it's dim and you can't see in there, but once all the light comes on, you're like, oh, it's really dirty. Now you have to clean it. And that's sort of where people are at in their consciousness and their evolution right now, is that this light comes up and everyone has to be really true to their darkness or their light or their disconnect or the dysfunction, all the dysfunctions coming to the surface. And I truly believe that the Me Too movement was part of that. That thing is always, that kind of energy has always been around, that the abuse of women or men too, the abuse with power and sexual power, that's always been there. But at some point, someone says enough is enough, and then suddenly, you get the Weinsteins and all these people. They come to light. They've been around for a long time. It's just now the consciousness has changed. Now people can't. They have to speak up. They have to, turn on the lights. They have to let the world know what they're seeing or what they're experiencing. Diddy and all these people I've been doing this for years, but the consciousness has changed. And that's because there's more light. People are unafraid. They're not afraid of speaking their truth, for being who they are, standing up for themselves. And I think we can see it everywhere, that everything is changing. The way it was in the 80s is not the way it is now. It's a different kind of energy.
That's for sure.
That's what I see in my practice. What I see is people's darkness coming up for them that has been there since childhood, or been there, and they were fine for a while. And now it's like come to a head where they have a disease, or they have a break, or they have something where they can't tolerate their life anymore. And now they have to go in and pull out the darkness and examine it for a minute, and then rip it out of their heart and set it on the ground. And that shift of consciousness is enough for the body or the mind or the conscious to say, okay, I've dealt with this thing. I can now move on to a person who has experienced something, not someone who's holding on to experiences. And that shift is going from what they call an active memory to a passive memory, right? When someone breaks up with her boyfriend and she's like so hurt and she's so anxious and she's so angry and, hates men, and going through her, licking her wounds, and she's going through that, that's an active memory. And then she goes on, she moves on, and she meets someone else, and he's so much better, and she's so in love. She thinks about that guy, and now it's a passive memory. So that's the difference between active and passive. Mm-hmm. When something is, but if you carry on childhood trauma, someone tells you you're just not good enough, and you go through your whole life believing you're not good enough until you go to a crisis where you really are kind of good enough now, Now you can let go of the ungood enough feeling. You have to do some processing of that out, because that thing doesn't apply anymore. That belief system is being challenged, right? So that's kind of some of the work I do. I get people to go in and find out what's there. I get them to heal themselves. I just walk them through a process or a bunch of processes to find out what's there. And that's where the big change is. That's where things really start to open up in their shift of consciousness and how they hold themselves in their energy field and in their body.
So when you say heal your heart, what's the process that in doing that with a client?
Well, so that story about the person with schizophrenia, that started my heart clearing, because I didn't know what to do. How do you heal? How do you forgive? I spent so much time with the brain and the body and fixing joints, and I never really worked with the heart until that moment. So thankfully she, working with her got me into, okay, we got to figure out what the heart is. And I was working with Ho'oponopono and heart clearing, like just breathing and releasing things. Well, I got people to go into their heart. So let's say a typical one, woman comes in, she just got divorced and she's really angry at her ex-husband. They went through a nasty divorce, a lot of money, kids, trauma. So I said, okay, so that's what's in your head. Let's go and see it's in your heart. So that's the trauma. Let's go in your heart and see what it's there. They go into their heart. I get them relaxed. I get them in this deep state. They go into their heart. Okay, where's the trauma? Well, the trauma is dad. I'm angry with dad. I'm like, well, how about the ex? No, I don't feel him there at all. I feel dad. She releases, and this is a very common thing, she releases the anger towards dad, who was unavailable, who left her when she was a young kid, and she has all these abandonment things. She forgives all that, releases all that, and then says, well, how do you feel about the ex-husband? I feel nothing. I feel neutral. It was never about him. He was just the pain du jour to get her in touch with the deeper feelings that she was carrying that she hadn't let go of. And it's amazing how people, what they think is what they're feeling is different from what they're actually feeling. But when you go to the heart, when you access your heart, that's where the truth is. Your heart will always tell you the truth or nothing. It will never lie to you. It will never make it. It will never sugarcoat it for you. It'll tell you exactly what's what. So when people put their hands on the heart and they just go in the heart, what are you carrying in that? Who are you carrying in there? Are you willing to pull that out? Are you willing to let that person go? Are you willing to process that out? And that's just my permission is for people to go into their heart and know that they're powerful enough that they can pull out those experiences and those definitions and those feelings, lay them on the ground and put love in its place and own their heart. The sovereignty of the heart is them owning their whole heart, not giving up half of it to this trauma or that person or this doctor or that, that teacher or whatever they're carrying. They can pull these things out. And then when they know they can do that, they can stay in their heart. And that's a flow balance state where people are more balanced within themselves. So that's where I try to get to with people. And it can be it's usually a one session, but sometimes it can be a few sessions. I had a woman and she's like, no, I'm not pulling it out. Nope, I can feel it. I'm not going to do it. I'm like, okay, you come in when you're ready. I'll do some Reiki. We'll continue this when you're ready. And because people think that their trauma is there for a purpose and reason, that there's some real gift to the trauma, or there's some, or they identify with their trauma, which is even worse. If you identify with your trauma, you will never get rid of that thing. John Veltam, you talked about body talk, and he told this great story about in the States, one of the head people in the arthritis, foundations, and he was the head person there, and he came down to do some healing work, and John Veltam asked him, I can heal this if you want. We can get rid of this disease if you want to. And the guy was so afraid because now he'd have to quit his job. How dare he not have arthritis, and he's the head of the Arthritis Foundation. I said, like, how can you be the head of something that you don't have it anymore? And he was so horrified by the idea that he'd get rid of this that he walked out of the place because he was so identifying with that disease. Mm-hmm. As part of his personality, and how dare someone take that away? He just sort of went in thinking no, there's no way he can help me. And when he knew that the person could help him, that's when that came to a crisis for him. So, that's what I mean by identifying with your diseases, if they're a part of you. And in the concussion world, oh my God, do I find this all the time. I out of curiosity, I go to these big seminars where there are all these doctors and people with concussions are talking about how to wear helmets and, how to, do some cranial sacral or, and I give them a business card. I'm like, yeah, just come in. I'll fix you. I'll come in 3 sessions. You're a doctor. You got a big practice, free of charge. Come on in. Let me just fix your concussion. Not a single one of them have ever called me. No, they're not even curious. They're not even curious. that someone could fix them, because it honestly, in 2 weeks, 3 sessions, maybe 3.5 hours, I can pretty much get most symptoms from a single concussion gone. If people are willing to do that, but I can't tell you how many people are not willing to do that. So I work with athletes, but I'm kind of like the dirty secret. Like, oh, just call Orion. You're an athlete in Oshawa. Just don't ask. Just go, pay the money, pay your $1,000, and he'll fix you. And I'm just in the sport world, in the AAA hockey world, I'm like the dirty little secret. All the parents know about me. They all whisper about me, and they give my business cards out, and I get a ton of business. But they won't actually tell their doctor. I don't know. It's gone now. It's fine, because they don't want to explain it. It's very strangely secretive. And if you're an athlete, listen, I understand it. If you have contracts, especially in the NHL, you got $1 million contracts. You don't want to tell people you have a concussion. You don't want to admit it, any injuries or diseases, because that can affect your net worth and what people pay for your services. And I get that. So yeah, in those ways, they won't talk about it. But yeah, absolutely. So that's some of the interesting trials and tribulations working with doctors and therapists in that field that they've coined, or they're working on some aspect of it, like sound therapy or special glasses that help balance, and things, vestibular adjustments or hyperbaric chambers. I know them all. I am very in on all the different things. When you actually connect to the brain part that's damaged and you get it to fix, then you have no reason for other therapeutic techniques. It just goes away, right? But
it's amazing that someone could have a problem and you have a solution, and they don't want to participate in it. They don't want to do it.
Oh, and and so my wife kind of laughs. It's like, well, anyone call you? Nope. Nope. And it's actually pretty funny. And I've met some good, very famous NHL players in the course of my life, and they were on stage and having a big talk at one of the big discussions. And I won't name his name, very well known. And I gave him my business card. I'm like, you know what? I said, alternative therapy is really useful for concussions. He says, and he pulls me aside. He's like, I don't want the doctor to hear this. He says, I went to this cranial sacral therapist person. It's the only relief I've got. I said, yeah, see? He says, yeah, absolutely. He says the only thing that's helped is actually energy work, to actually access and do some work on that. So he actually did get help from that. So he's claiming he has concussion, but he says it's about 25% of what it used to be now with the cranial sacral therapy he's been doing. And that was very helpful to him. But his was, when cranial sacral is really good for the cerebral spinal fluid. And when people do adjustments on the cerebral spinal fluid, sometimes that can rejig the fluid going to the brain. And I don't want to get too geeky and technical on you, but that there is something to spinal, like actually tapping on the spine and doing spinal work for some people, because it helps when you rebalance the water in the cerebral spinal fluid, you can help the function of the brain. And that does come up sometimes in the work I do.
Wow. Well, Orion, you had so much good information, a lot to chew on. I've got like pages of notes, because now I'm going to try the drum, and I'm going to try the going into the heart and all of that, because we're always learning and adjusting as we go.
I want to give, every time I go on a podcast, I want to give something back. I like to give something to the audience, and I usually do that towards the end. So if it's okay with you, I want to teach people about the thymus gland. This is the most important gland on the body, and it is so accessible to consciousness, but it's in the nape of the neck. So you have your clavicle, and you go down about 2 inches, and it's this jelly-like material that sits right here, and it kind of looks like grapes in jelly. It's like a fatty material and these little cirular bits. That is your immune system. That's where your T cells are made. It also, as we understand, it knows what belongs to you and what doesn't belong to you. So when you have things like diseases, things like bacteria in your body, things your body needs to get rid of, cancers, diseases, whatever. When you consciously put your hand here and you shine your unconditional love into your thymus gland, that jelly-like substance with the little grapes in there, you shine it, you feel that light go in, you put unconditional love, your high hearts, you shine unconditional love, and then you send that to your disorder, your knee problem, your back problem, whatever's going on physically. You send that light and that love from that thymus into the thing. You can actually change how your immune system responds. You can consciously affect your immune system when you know that your immune system is the level of unconditional love you have, and you direct that unconditional love from your thymus gland into your problem, into your injury. You can actually speed up your immune system. Absolutely.
Wow.
And that works for everything. That works for cancers. That works for diseases. The thing Our immune system is literally a physical manifestation of our unconditional love for ourselves. That's what it is. And that's where we go with that. And people whose light and love shines upwards generally don't have as many physical problems. They shine that light upwards, and people who have a sense of divinity, who shine their light up, they're aware of that energy up and down light, usually don't have problems with their immune system. Why? Because they're automatically connecting with their unconsciously. They're shining that light from their heart upwards, above their head, or whatever it is, or Qigong, where you're doing this energy work, where the energy going up and down, or Reiki, where you're going through the chakras. But that thymus gland is your immune system. And if anyone's going to do work on themselves to shine that unconditional love there, they can actually change their immune system. So I highly recommend doing some meditations on that. You can also find my if you look for Sacred Activations, Harness the Power of Consciousness, that's my album. It's on every platform. It's my meditation album. I have one for the immune system that's based on the thymus and the spleen and working with the energies. But it's out there. I did during COVID, because I'm like, there's stuff you guys can use with all that fear out there. There's something you can do while you're laying there in your bed and you're having these fevers. And it really speeds up the natural immune system. So
Can you say the name of that again?
it's called Sacred Activations, Harness the Power of Consciousness by Orion Mott. And I'm on iTunes. I'm on every platform. So every platform that has music will have my album on it. So people can find it there, stream it, or purchase it from iTunes.
Awesome. So can you share your website,
Sure, yeah,
any
absolutely.
projects or books that you have available?
Well, people can, my name is my website, orionmott.com. It's ORIONMOTT.com. And the best way to reach me is through WhatsApp. My phone number is there. I am from the States, but I'm currently living in Toronto right now. So you can WhatsApp me from any phone number to my WhatsApp, and I'll be able to talk to you and book a session with you or a chat with you or whatever. We'll see what I can do in terms of being of service to you and what you're interested in working on. I have to do concussions in person. They have to come see me in Toronto or fly me out to their location, which I've done. But all the other things I can do online and through Skype or whatever.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And all the information is going to be in the show notes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tina. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, it was really fun. I feel like we just grazed the topics that we could actually talk about.
You have a really good heart. You have this really, when I talk to you, I can feel this incredible warmth from you. That's one of your gifts. Absolutely. You make me feel so comfortable talking to you. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.